Hey there, how's it going? So, game jams are kind of my thing here on YouTube. And because of that, I get contacted every now and then to either join or judge one. So when I was contacted by the creator of the YouTube channel CS Dojo about the Kajam running on a platform they're working with called Replit, I took a look. Replit is a free in-browser IDE to help people code in more than 50 languages. It also has this really neat feature where you can code at the same time as your collaborators, kinda like using Google Docs. Which is all cool, except for the fact that I'm not really focused on programming or being a programmer, and I don't even really know one programming language, to be honest. My focus when making games is on design and user experience, and the only tool I use is Construct 3, which is a game engine that has a more visual-based coding process. I still write all the logic for the games that I make, but it doesn't require me to stare at walls of text and write a bunch of syntax. It's a process and a way of working that's great for me and what I want to make at the moment. So after checking it out, I had to reply that unfortunately I can't take part due to not really being able to quote-unquote code properly. Then I was made aware that because Replit supports HTML, a web build from other engines like Unity can be used, and it would probably work with Construct as well. So I did a quick test and it totally worked. I just swapped out a few files and it runs great. They asked if I would still want to take part and show off this feature, and I was in. So thank you to Replit and Kaboom for sponsoring this video and having me as a guest participant and judge. It's an honor to join other content creators like Polymars, Jabrills, Arcade, Anya, But Why Levin, and Tech with Tim to make some fun experiences and just share the joy of making games overall. The jam ran through October 18th through the 25th. At this point, I'm still coming back from the break that I took because I burned out quite heavily, and I was ready to keep up the momentum rolling from Ludum Dare. My number one goal for the jam, like last time, is to keep my scope in check and make something that I think is fun. Sometimes I go into a jam with a mechanic or idea that I want to force, like I did in my last Ludum Dare game, where I really wanted to play with my Portal Pong idea. There's a card up top if you missed that video. This time though, I went into the jam with nothing in particular that I wanted to make. I decided to spend my entire stream the first day brainstorming and planning with my Twitch chat, which I definitely needed because the theme for Kajam is huge, and I had nothing for a long time. In a 48-hour jam, the pressure is there to come up with an idea and start working as soon as possible. Although even in that situation, I've still been finding it more helpful to slow down and dedicate some time to actual brainstorming and coming up with a plan. And since Kajam is a week long, I really wanted to make sure that I had a solid foundation for what I was going to make. But I'll be real, I was having a tough time with the theme. Huge just didn't initially spark any ideas for me. My Twitch chat and I came up with a bunch of different concepts, but nothing really clicked. Several of them were pretty neat ideas, but just not possible with the amount of time I had to actually work on the project. Or I felt they were too much of a low-hanging fruit, and I figured there would be plenty of other games doing the exact same thing. When approaching a game jam concept, I like to try to do something as unique as I can so I don't just get lost in the crowd of similar game ideas. Lately, I've been playing a lot of Spelunky 2, so a Jack and the Beanstalk idea where you're traveling down the beanstalk trying to escape from a huge giant seemed fun. While I wasn't completely hooked on the idea, the concept of traversing down from a huge height seemed like it could be a good one. Especially if I added something like the slow fall cape from Spelunky. That led me down the line of thinking to Super Mario World, where the cape originated from, to the segments where you're falling through a bunch of coins trying to collect as many as you can. Washing windows on a huge building was eventually thrown out, and the spark was finally lit. Making a score-based platformer where you run around cleaning windows is just out there enough that it seems like a game I could have played back in the arcade in the 90s. We continued to brainstorm, and I had a plan to make a game like Spelunky where you started out at the top of a building, and then you traveled your way down dodging birds and other hazards to clean as many windows as you can. The next day on stream, we got to work creating the basic mechanics. We had a player that could run and jump, and while falling you could open up a parachute to slow your descent. I added windows that would be dirty until the player passed over them. There was a thought about making the player need to take an action to actually clean the windows, but I wanted to make the game more focused on quick movement, and stopping to press a button on every window would really make the pace of the game stagger in my opinion. Once the player falls past the windows and lands on the floor, there's not really much they can do to clean the windows anymore. Instead of making it a one-time drop where you clean the windows and that's all you get, I added in elevators that would transport the player back to the top of the building so they could drop again. Next up was adding some checks for the fall speed of the player. If they're falling too fast, the windows won't be cleaned to avoid people just dropping straight down. I also added in a live system, that way if you fell too fast you would lose a life and you'd have 3 total, kind of fitting into the old classic arcade style. So the player will need to clean as many windows as they can within a time limit or before they lose all of their lives. To enhance the gameplay, I added some pickups like a double jump, a dash, and a speed up, and I made a huge level with lots of windows to begin testing actual gameplay mechanics. Because we're going for an arcade high score type game, we added in scoring obviously. The more I played with the mechanics, the more I really liked the gliding, and I wanted to encourage that type of gameplay. So to incentivize the type of gameplay that I wanted to encourage, The player receives a multiplier for every window they clean without touching the ground. This can make the scores get big really fast, and I was envisioning people trying to optimize their play to get huge multipliers. But to prevent people from just slowly gliding through as many windows as they can, we added in a timer to help encourage them to find a better route. And to encourage that, we added a pickup that would add more time to your timer whenever collected. I threw in a bounce pad because it's me and I'm making a platformer game. And if I don't add a bounce pad to a platformer game, what am I really doing in game dev? At this time, I still thought there would be a bit more running around on ledges and using the bounce pads to get up and down areas, but I hadn't fully figured out the level progression yet. I added things like open windows to use as hazards that the player needs to avoid, because from the perspective of the world, nobody wants someone to come and spray water into their open window. And we topped off the stream by adding a camera zoom to be able to show off the full size of the building. The theme of the jam is huge after all, and we need to make sure the player can see the scale of the whole building compared to you, so that way when the camera's zoomed in, you understand that it's still huge. With a lot of the basic mechanics in, I went into the weekend needing to figure out what the game was going to look like. And since I don't stream on the weekend, I settled in to work without the distraction of streaming and started in on the art. I grabbed a palette from lowspec.com as always, and this time I'm using Rampy 16 made by a noob. Although more so than usual, I used this palette as a foundation and I added many of my own colors. Even when I do this, I still prefer to start with a palette because it's nicer to have a good base to start with. Because I was going to have to make a huge building, I went for a base scale of my player of 16 by 16 pixels, and I tried to keep the details as light as I could to make animation easier later. I created the key poses for all of the player's states like idle, gliding, hit, dashing, jump, and fall, and an extra one for falling too fast. And after that, it was time for the thing I was dreading, which is the building itself. I had no idea where to start making a building of this scale, so I took to the internet to look for some inspiration. I found this really great image from the arcade version of Wreck-It Ralph, and I used that as my reference point for my building. It has a classic video game look without being too detailed or too plain. Like I said, I've never made a building this large before, and it caused some unique challenges that I wasn't expecting. I'm used to working on pixel art that I can see the details all at once while it's on screen. But this building is literally so huge that I can't actually work on a pixel level and see it all at the same time. I added in platforms throughout the building that the player could stand on. I originally tried to make them look like they fit a little bit more with the building, but they were blending in a bit too much, so I added a darker outline and a darker color to make sure that the player knew that that was a platform and not something that they could just pass through. The rows and rows of windows was getting a bit too repetitive, so I deleted some and added in some pillars to just break up the monotony. I then spent a good amount of time working on a lot of the ancillary art things, like power-ups, making the animations for the players, the elevators, etc. While adding the art into the game, I wanted to make sure that cleaning the windows would feel as rewarding as getting a coin in a game like Mario. So I added a flash animation to the windows and made them bulge a little bit as the player passed by them to make sure you could really tell there was a change. While testing, I wasn't liking the way that when hitting an open window or falling from too high would actually make you lose life. The point of the game is to get as many windows cleaned as possible before the timer runs out. Losing life doesn't really enhance that in any way. So I repurposed it into a stun that would make the player fall and lose a few seconds before they could get up and keep moving. Just to make sure there was an adequate penalty, if you did hit an open window and got stunned, it takes away your multiplier. And to be honest, I felt this better served the idea of the game and helped improve the game flow. I also changed a few other things from the initial idea that just didn't really fit with the game flow either. I was going to have birds and other random hazards that would get in the player's way, but I really liked the idea that players could try to optimize their movement to get a huge score. This is also the reason that I chose not to make any elements of the level randomized. I had thought about making elements like the location of open windows and pickups change each time you play. But once again, that didn't really enhance the playstyle that I wanted, so I opted to have a static level that the players could learn and really optimize. Then it was time for the boring stuff like the menus, how to play, credits, all that fun jazz. As well as adding music and sound effects, which I just pulled from my library of purchased assets. The jam ended Monday night, so I was able to stream my final touches as well as get the community to playtest to see if they could find any bugs. This is seriously one of the biggest benefits to not overscoping and working right up until the deadline. We, as designers of our games, will never see and play them the same way as our players will. We're just too close to the project and used to the way that we play it, so there's a lot of things that we have blinders to. My community made a bunch of great suggestions, as well as found numerous small bugs that would have caused problems if they had not been fixed. A huge thank you to everyone that was there and helped out. You're all awesome. We then exported the game and transferred the files into Replit. It's literally as easy as unzipping the export and replacing the base files from the HTML REPL. Dude, it's so cool! It's so cool, it just works! How does it just work? And after a bit more testing, fixing, re-exporting, to make sure that everything was working as intended, here's the game. Window Washer and the Huge Hotel is a classic high-score arcade game. The player has 30 seconds to glide down the front of the hotel and clean as many windows as they can before the time runs out. They can glide to increase their horizontal distance, but watch out for open windows. The people inside will not be happy if you clean the inside of their room for them. Players can pick up time bonuses, which will add 5 seconds to their timer, and there are 3 special power-ups to pick up as well: a double jump, a dash, and a speed increase. Once the player reaches the ground, they can take one of 3 elevators back to the top to descend again. The timer does stop while you're in the elevator because it felt a bit unfair to keep it running while the player doesn't have control. Cleaning multiple windows without touching the ground will give you a multiplier per window to your score. When landing on the ground or ledge, or being stunned, the multiplier will reset to 0 and must be started again. There are 999 dirty windows in total, and at the end of the run, the game will save the highest score achieved as well as the most number of windows cleared in one run. We did some testing and looked at the numbers. I don't think it's actually possible to clean all 999, and I'm kind of okay with that because it's more about maxing out your efficiency to get the best numbers you can. But keeping track of both score and the number of windows cleaned gives the player 2 different goals to go into the game with, so they have options of how they would like to play. Overall, I'm really happy with this game, and I feel that the game loop is tight and enjoyable. I've really liked playing it, and I had many people on my stream telling me they were trying to optimize their play to get as high a score as they can, or a high window count. I'll throw in one fun mistake I made, and I'm just calling it an Easter egg instead, and that's the jump pad. Remember that thing? While I was designing the levels, I realized that my initial thought of the player running between different platforms and jumping up and down the building was just not going to work, as I wanted to focus on the gliding. So since I limited the number of platforms, I just stuck the placeholder jump pad off to the side and figured I would either add it into the game later or just delete it. But it turns out I didn't do either, and in the game, if you gather all 3 power-ups, you can jump, dash, and glide your way over to the far top right of the level, where it still sits floating in the air, and you can land on it and use it to bounce, which then gives you the ability to jump over the bounds of the level and get completely outside of the game boundaries. Okay, we got plenty of time now. Okay, there it is. Whee! And we're out. Yeah, totally out of the world. I found this to be hilarious and not a problem because it requires knowing that it's there as well as all 3 power-ups. So instead of going back, removing it, re-exporting the game and all of that, I just left it and figured, hey, if you can find it and you can get out, have fun. Now it's just swag you can pull off, and since the timer isn't too long and you need to collect all the other power-ups first, you're not stuck outside the play area forever or soft-locked or anything like that. Once the timer counts down, you just restart as normal. The Kajam ended with almost 400 projects submitted, and there are some really cool ideas to check out. There will be a link in the description to check out my game as well as all of the other games submitted to the jam. Thank you so much to Replit and Kaboom for sponsoring this video. I had an absolute blast taking part in this jam, and I'm extremely happy with the game I produced. If you're a coder, please check out Replit. It's a great in-browser IDE with more than 50 languages supported. And as I found, it's super easy to port over projects from other engines as well. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this look into the creation of the game. If you did, hitting the like button would be very much appreciated, and if you want to see more, be sure to subscribe. If you have any questions, would like to chat with me, or would like to be there when I'm working on future jams, check out my live streams at twitch.tv/Vimlark. We also have a Discord full of amazing and helpful people. I need to give a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters for help making these videos possible, especially my video producer tier patrons like Clone13, Cortland Massam, Curdle Games, Nightfall, It's Jeppy, Jed, Kevin Haugal, Killboy Gaming, Motzi Makes, Nazar Salim, Salty Pretzel, Scott Hansen, Soapy Gnome, Straight Up Gruntled, and Warren Stephen Rose. You're all amazing people, and I truly appreciate the support. Thank you again for watching, and I will talk with you next time. Have a good one. Later.